Take a beloved book franchise, an Emmy-winning actress, release the film on a light box office weekend, and you have the formula for a number one movie. Unless people don't go to see it, or even like it that much. But does that make it a bad movie? We're going bounty hunting for positives as we prove to you that 2012's One for the Money, it's not that bad. Welcome to this edition of It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies. And what we're looking at today is what was hopefully going to be the beginning of a lucrative film franchise, but just happened to have a bit of a failure to launch. And joining me as we take a look at 2012's One for the Money, my wife, Carrie, is back behind the mic. Carrie, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, and I'm so happy to be back.
Now, when we were discussing movies to pick up for this episode, we talked about One for the Money. And first of all, you didn't even know that this movie existed.
Not a clue, sad to say.
And which I find kind of funny because you yourself are a huge fan of the Janet Evanovich book series that this movie is based on. So before we even get into talking about the movie itself, what is it about the Janet Evanovich Stephanie Plum series that you like so much?
Oh my God, they are so well written. They're funny. They're, it doesn't take itself too seriously. They're quick reads, absolute page turners. You can't put the book down. I can't say enough about this book series. And yes, sad to say that I was unaware that this movie even existed, even though I have every single book in the Stephanie Plum series.
And for the record, that is 28 books and counting.
All 28.
She actually just put out number 28 fairly recently. I think it was the beginning of November that it was released. But there comes the problem. We know the saying, the book is always better than the movie.
Yes.
So I have to ask, but before we even get into talking about how good the movie actually was, were you nervous about sitting down and watching a movie based on a book series that you love so much?
I was frightened. I went into it telling myself, you know what? I'm going to put all expectations behind me. I'm going to put all of my preconceived notions of who should play which character. I had the movie already cast out, I had the book and the character of Stephanie Plum already cast in my mind. And yes, I was nervous. I was hesitant. But as soon as I heard the movie existed, I had to watch it. And I am so happy that I did.
Okay, so we're going to get ready to get into the breakdown of this film. But before we do, it's time. So, Carrie, you actually have the book in your hand, the Janet Evanovich One for the Money book in your hand. So let's take the back of the book and trailerize it.
Trenton native Stephanie Plum is out of work, out of money, and her car's in repo hell. So who does a hardly working girl turn to when the going gets tough? Meet cousin Vinny, bail bondsman. Stephanie figures it's nice work if you can get it. Her first assignment? Nail Joe Morelli, a former vice cop on the run from a charge of murder one. There's also a cranky ex-prize fighter dogging her and a nasty habit she has of leaping first and looking later. If Stephanie doesn't wise up fast, the first dead body she sees could be her own.
Nice. So now there's a lot to unpack from this story, and admittedly, I have not read the book. I'm very happy to help you get the collection, the full collection, all 28 books of this. But it's one of those things where you sit there, take a look, and go, okay, this seems like a fun series. So something that people can kind of get involved in. So let me ask you, was this a fair representation of what they can expect?
It was. It was so true to the characterization, the way the narrative, the way that the movie starts out, it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect for any Janet Ivanovich fan out there. And if there are many, my hat's off to you. And it definitely, if you haven't seen the movie, you need to watch One for the Money. And I'm still waiting for the other 27 movies to be made, which I highly doubt is going to happen.
Not judging by the ratings that it got and the fact that, it didn't quite do as well as the box office as I'm sure they'd hoped. But let's get into who's in this. In the main role of Stephanie Plum is Katherine Heigl, and most people will recognize her from Grey's Anatomy and Knocked Up, and a lot of other different movies out there. She's also an executive producer on the film, mainly because she's in almost every scene of this film. But I have to ask you, because that's always one of those big scary things. When you've got a book, you got a series, you have a character that's been well established, literary wise, and people have that image of who would be that perfect person to play that role. So I have to ask you, going into this, was Katherine Heigl your envisionment of who Stephanie Plum should be?
That's a great question. I would say she wasn't on my radar. She was definitely not the vision of the casted character when I was reading the book. However, watching the movie, she warmed up into that character of Stephanie Plum. It's almost like she starts out very rigid and kind of almost, I don't know, it's almost like halfway through the movie, she just completely embodies Stephanie Plum. And I mean, she was right on the money. Like, she was perfect in this role.
You also have, you mentioned the character Joseph Morelli in the trailer rise. You had Jason O'Mara, and while the face may not be that familiar, the voice is very familiar because Jason O'Mara has done what I thought may have been impossible. Bold statement, to me, the best Batman is Kevin Conroy. Now, if you don't know who Kevin Conroy is, just go watch Batman the Animated Series. Kevin Conroy was able to kind of have the perfect tenor of voice for Batman. Jason O'Mara, who has kind of taken over the Batman role as far as animated goes, has done equally as good a job as Kevin Conroy. I would never say better because Kevin Conroy is damn good. Jason O'Mara is also damn good as Batman. And, I'm going to admit right now, because, I'm familiar with his Batman work, it was really hard not to want to picture him in a Batman mask, cowl and cape as he's running around in this, because I could hear the voice.
That amazes me. And I literally have to go and watch the animated Batman series that you're talking about, because I can't picture it. I cannot picture Joe Morelli being Batman.
I want to put it out there that there are about 3 of the animated movies that he has done, including Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, Batman Bad Blood, and there was another one. The 3 of them have a 100% tomato meter.
Wow.
That is how good, not just those DC animated films are. Anyone complaining about DC movies, go watch the animated movies. They are infinitely better than anything that the DCEU is putting out. But yeah, 100% tomato meter for those animated films, and Jason O'Mara is a solid Batman. You also have Daniel Sunjata, and I apologize if I butcher your name, Daniel. Daniel Sunjata as Ranger. Now, if that doesn't seem familiar, most people will recognize him from Graceland, Rescue Me, and The Devil Wears Prada. So there's another book that was, kind of transferred over to movie lore. You also had Debbie Reynolds in her last ever feature film as the grandmother, John Leguizamo as, bad guy, which I think is what John Leguizamo plays in almost every movie. You had Fisher Stevens. Most people will recognize him lately from Succession. And Sherry Shepherd. She was one of the prostitute that was constantly giving tips to Stephanie Plum. I know her best from 30 Rock as Tracy Jordan's wife in that show. Oh, the look on your face.
Blown. Oh my God, I did not place that.
She was great in that, and she's phenomenal in this. It was directed by Julianne Robinson, who is primarily a television director. You know, one of those things we find ourselves saying a lot on the show. This would be the last film she would ever direct that would be released in theaters. But you know, her TV directing credits are huge. She's done episodes for Bridgerton, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Orange is the New Black. She has got some major show directorial credits to her resume. So the movie itself clearly was in good hands until it got to the box office. This movie, One for the Money, had a $42 million production budget. It only took in $26 million domestically and $36 million worldwide. So it's a money loser. Even when you take in the worldwide budget, it did not make its money back. And I wonder, and I have to put it out there because we talked about this at the beginning of the show, that you, a Janet Ivanovich fan, reader, collector, did not know this movie existed.
I am so sorry. I honestly feel like I'm being, punished right now. And
they could have made $36 million and $10, but you didn't know about it.
The finger wag is, I have to ask about the publicity. You had mentioned earlier that Katherine Heigl and Janet Ivanovich did a
promo tour.
But maybe I was in a coma in 2012. I don't know. I don't remember. Honestly, I had no idea.
You know what the funny thing is, though? If you take a look at the box office from that weekend, we mentioned at the very, very top of the show that it was a light box office weekend, and it was ridiculously light. The top grossing movie of that weekend, which was also debuted, was The Grey, also known as Liam Neeson Stuck in the Woods. That's basically all that movie is. It grossed $19.665 million on that opening weekend. One for the Money opened in third. Right behind Underworld Awakening, which was in its second week. So you had a Liam Neeson in 2012 debuting movie where it looks like he's about to go one-on-one with a wolf in the woods, and who doesn't want to go see that? Underworld Awakening, so you have a franchise there, and then One for the Money. I mean, but the rest of the box office top 10 that week, as you go down, by the way, that opening weekend for One for the Money, $11.5 million. So when you take a look at the fact that, $19.5 million is number one, Underworld Awakening number two is just over $12 million, and then you got $11.5 million for One for the Money. Very respectable, but it was out of the top 10 in its third week. So it dropped fast. But the rest of the top 10, you got Red Tails, Man on a Ledge, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, Contraband, The Descendants, Beauty and the Beast 3D. The fact that a Disney movie that had been re-released, in what was arguably its 1055th week of box office, still was able to crack the top 10. That just tells you it was a really light week. So whether it was between major releases or whatever, it was just a lull in this, in the box office. This is January 27th. And you know what? That kind of makes sense a little bit. Because if you think about it, a lot of movies are pumped out for the holidays, right? You get a lot of Christmas releases. There's a lot of push to get, and then there's a lull. January, no one goes to the movies. And then it kind of picks up again in February. So it's kind of a crappy release time when you take a look at it as far as, the calendar goes. So maybe that also kind of led to the fact that, like, we're still all recovering from the turkey that we ate at Christmas. We're just starting to do the belt back up. It might that turkey fatigue is starting to wear off. But by the time you get to Valentine's Day, which is another major release time for movies, this movie's out. Like, it's out of the top 10. It's an afterthought at this point. So, if anything, the studio release timing of the film did it no favors whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is I would be curious what movies came out that December that were maybe still in the theater.
You're looking at 2011. We would have to take a look back a little bit, but, regardless of, I mean, the fact that Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close was in its 6th week in the box office from that, as far as the top 10 goes. Everything else, I mean, and The Descendants was in its 11th week, but everything else, was either in its 1st or 2nd week. So the deck had been cleared from Christmas. So it's not even like you had something like The Force Awakens, which gets released in December and then carries on till whenever, right? The deck had been cleared, so clearly the 2011 Christmas season wasn't a huge release slate, or if it was something that was there and maybe kind of bombed out. Who knows? But part of the problem may have been, though, is that this movie came out in 2012. The book came out in 1994. Exactly. Yeah. So here you have, 8 years. No, more. Mm-hmm. That's more, like, because I can't do math. 18 years between book and movie, right? That's a long, long time to go. And yes, admittedly, sometimes, things kind of get a second life. And I get that. But the rights for this movie were bought in 1997.
Oh.
Columbia and TriStar had the rights in 1997, and then those rights were acquired by Lionsgate in 2010. This movie was in developmental hell.
Why is that?
I honestly don't know. They had the rights, and that's something that movie companies will do. They see a franchise or they see a property that they're like, you know what? If we bought this and we made a movie out of it, we could easily we can make a movie. We're fine. We're good. But then they get it and they stall on it and they sit on it and they don't want to do anything until they think that, okay, maybe we can do something with it. And then, if they don't afterwards, then they'll sell it off or whatever, or they'll hold on to it and they'll push something out just to kind of keep the rights. But that is a long time for developmental hell, to the point of, like, even Janet Evanovich herself. There was a quote that she had said in an interview saying they're sitting on a multi-million-dollar movie franchise and here we are still waiting, but is what it is, kind of thing. And I'm obviously paraphrasing the quote, but Evanovich knew, like, the rights had been acquired. So I'm sure it was a relief to see the movie out there, and she seemed very happy with it. But, it's like the anti-Clive Cussler in this case, because, anytime a Clive Cussler movie comes out, Clive Cussler himself is poo-pooing over the entire movie. That can't do it well. Here we have Janet Evanovich, who's very happy with the movie, and yet it still didn't help.
It's interesting, as you were mentioning that, I popped over to Fantastic Fiction and I was curious which book in the series she was on by 2012. So in 2012, Notorious 19 was released. There were 2 releases, Smokin' 17 and Explosive 18 in 2011. So to put that into perspective,
you're 18 books in. Fans
of the book series are 18 books in, and they're only getting around to the first of the story. So really, in the 18 years, you've pretty much forgotten
the first book,
the premise of the plot of the first book. Mm-hmm. And I can't say enough as a fan of the book series how cool it is to have read up to, I think I'm literally sitting at 23 that I've read. Okay, 22 or 23 was where I left off. A lot has happened to Stephanie Plum and in her life by that point. So to double back to where it all began in One for the Money, and to see kind of that dynamic of where she is in her life, recently divorced. She's hunting down Joe Morelli, who fans of the series, I don't know, am I allowed to do spoilers? I'm going to just break all the rules today.
We are almost 10 years since the movie has come out. So if you haven't watched the movie yet, you know what you can do with yourself.
But if you haven't watched the movie yet, go watch the movie and then continue to do whatever to yourself. But what I was saying is the dynamic and the relationship between Stephanie and Joe has come a long way since this movie. So watch the movie and then pick up the other 27 books and read them all, because it's really fantastic.
Of which I'm sure will be up to 30 books by the time you get through all 28.
I'm working on it.
But to give you an idea of just how good this franchise could be, the book itself, One for the Money, won the 1995 Dillis Award, presented by the Independent Mystery Booksellers Association. This movie got some accolades too. Not the kind you want, but it got some notice, because Katherine Heigl was nominated for Worst Actress at the Razzies that year. She didn't win.
For this movie.
For this
role.
She did not win. But she was nominated for Worst Actress.
I am angry by that.
She lost to Kristen Stewart, who was nominated for both Snow White and the Huntsman and Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. I'm sorry, you can't say Part 2 and not follow it up with Electric Boogaloo. If you don't, you've missed the opportunity. But, and I think this might even be worse than a Razzie nomination.
Oh, bring it.
The Alliance of Women Film Journalists at the 2012 EDA Awards, Katherine Heigl co-won the award for, I'm going to put in air quotes for all of you who are not listening.
Oh, he's got the finger quotations.
Finger quotes are out. She co-won the award for, and this is apparently an award, Actress Most in Need of a New Agent.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's harsh, man.
That is. She co-won that award with Reese Witherspoon, who that year also had the movie This Means War come out. Now, I haven't watched This Means War, but you know, if that's the kind of accolades that they are getting from these movies, that just tells you everything you need to know. But that leads us to the Rotten Tomatoes score. And I'm going to start with the audience score on this one, because the audience score is about 42%, which, you know, it's not bad. You know, it's not horrible. What's horrible is the tomato meter score. 2% tomato meter or tomatometer.
All I can say is there's a lot of film critics out there who have never picked up a book, because honestly, as a huge fan of the book series, if you were to just go into watching this movie without that previous love for the character
of knowing nothing about the book series whatsoever.
Knowing nothing about the character.
So if you're me.
Okay. So then I have to ask you, what did you think?
Oh, we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
But right now we're talking about the tomato meter. And I do have to say, if we're looking for positives, this wasn't Katherine Heigl's worst tomato meter movie.
It gets worse.
It gets worse.
Than 2%.
It gets the big donut worse.
Ooh.
Because in 2006, Katherine Heigl was in a movie called Caffeine with Manu Suvari and Breckin Meyer, and that got the big old donut of 0% on the tomato meter. So it's not Caffeine, you know, so there's positive there. I want to point out too, And this might have actually led to why it got a low tomato meter and why it didn't do so well at the box office. Because 2012 was the last year of Jersey Shore on MTV. And Jersey Shore, for anyone who has never watched Jersey Shore, you are the lucky chosen few. But for anyone who does, they know that Jersey Shore is not exactly the best representation of people in Jersey. And this movie, is based in New Jersey, and there is a whole lot of Jersey accent in this film. So I wonder, I do have to question if there was some Jersey Shore fatigue that led into One for the Money, and people hear the Jersey accent and go, "Oh, where's Snooki and JWoww?" It's quite possible. And then one of the other things too, and I have to bring this up, Katherine Heigl, for as good an actress as she is, she's got an Emmy to prove it, hasn't exactly had the best work with reputation. WatchMojo.com had her as number 6 on their list of top 10 difficult actors to work with. Part of that is the fact that, she kind of got called out for dissing the script of Knocked Up, even though she was in it, and, making some comments that made the writers and producers of Grey's Anatomy kind of sit there and go, "Whoa, hold your horses there, Catherine." So, who knows? Again, full disclaimer, we don't know jack of what goes on behind the scenes of the movies. But, if you take a look at, because Jersey Shore by 2012 is just like an annoying joke, and, you've got all this, I don't know to say bad press, but, not exactly, shining light of, or beacon of niceness. Katherine Heigl wasn't exactly America's sweetheart in 2012. So I wonder how much all that plays into the tomato meter. So when the critics go into a film, their guns are already loaded and they're ready to just, fire away some just nasty hyperbole on this.
I don't know. I mean, if you were to just watch the movie, again, without the prior, knowledge from the book series, it's not a bad movie, but it's not, it's kind of almost like an HBO made for TV series turned into, a blockbuster released in theaters. So production wise, I can kind of see where, yeah, I mean, you could watch it and be like, really, what is this? And I think too, a lot of it, as a fan of the book series, it's like, yes, the book is better than the movie. I think there's a lot of backstory or a lot of scenes where they tried to fill in the backstory or provide the information that's needed, but I think they kind of faltered with that. There were a few scenes where it's kind of like, who is this character and what is happening and why is this important to the plot line? Because it wasn't flushed out well enough in the 2 hours. Actually, an hour 35.
Yeah, it's not a long movie by any stretch of the imagination.
It is not. And I really feel like either it needed to be a 2-hour movie or they needed to almost add some more to the scripting. I do love how they had, the narration, the kind of, helped it along in certain parts, mostly at the beginning.
Almost diary-esque.
Right.
Kind of. But to another comparison, you take a look at, I guess it was the original theatrical release of Blade Runner where you had, Harrison Ford's narration kind of go through it. Obviously, the director's cut doesn't have that, but it kind of helps almost that, speaking of bounty hunters, because Blade Runner is basically that, a bounty hunter, if you will, almost that film noir type feel to it, even though this film doesn't really come across as film noir. But I want to put this out there, and this was one of the things that kind of really sat with me. in that you have a character and a series of books, and something about this film just said to me, this would be so much better as a series. This would be so much better if, maybe not a Netflix, but I mean, like, this could be a network television series and do really, really well. And the first thing that came to mind as I'm watching this is Karen Sisco.
I was going to say, I was really going to pull that parallel.
Yeah, because, Elmore Leonard fans, speaking of prolific mystery writers, right? Elmore Leonard fans know that the Out of Sight came out, and then the character of Karen Sisco was picked up and built into a series starring Carla Gugino. And again, apologies to Carla if I just completely mussed up your name. But that series was so much fun. It was so much fun, and I kind of wish they did more than one season of Karen Sisco, because it lent itself well to an episodic kind of case of the week series. And I think Stephanie Plum would not just do well, but thrive in that bounty of the week kind of, or even you have an underlying storyline that kind of goes through, because there is a lot to this, not just to this movie, but to the, the back, the characters and how they're fleshed out. So being a fan of the series as you are, again, better as a movie or even better as a series?
I completely agree. I think as a series, there's so much more they could do with it, with the backstory, with even the bad guys and the quirkiness of the misadventures of Stephanie Plum would be just brilliant.
Okay,
as a series.
So let's get to the acting here, and I think we need to start at the top. We need to start right at number one on the call sheet, in Katherine Heigl. I liked her in this. I really did, and I think I liked her despite the script and the direction, because there were times when her Stephanie Plum felt kind of not ditzy, but definitely out of her element and definitely a little frenetic. And then there were times when she kind of felt over cocky, right? Cocky or clueless it was kind of one or the other. And again, maybe this is one of those things where in a series you can kind of flush that out and see the development. In an hour and a half, you kind of have to rush everything into it. So I think I enjoyed her despite the script she was dealing with, and despite how everything kind of felt rushed an hour and a half. So again, we talked a little bit about, is Katherine Heigl your Stephanie Plum? So what made her enjoyable to you as Stephanie Plum?
I find it fascinating that you would describe her as a mix of ditzy and
clueless and cocky.
Because that is the quintessential beauty of Stephanie Plum. That is what's endearing about the character, is that she's a strong, smart woman who finds herself in misadventures and just if bad luck were a thing, she's got it. It's and it's not that she's ditzy or clueless. It's that she gets put in these situations where, it's like there's really no
jump first, ask questions later.
Right? I think Katherine Heigl was perfect as the character. She wasn't, when I read the book, her face or her, she wasn't my first pick. She wasn't who I pictured when I was reading the text. However, to see her portray the character, I thought she was right on the money. She was perfect.
I do have to give her credit for pulling off that wig, though.
Yes.
Because that's a wig. She didn't dye her hair. That's a wig. And
the hair was perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kudos to the hair department for that. Joe Morelli. Jason O'Mara. Again, and I mentioned my whole thing about Batman. And I think one of the things I had trouble kind of getting over with, or over on this movie, is that directing wise, and this kind of goes to the directing, I didn't know if it was supposed to be a comedy or an action film, and I don't think the movie itself quite knew either, because there were times when I'm watching Jason O'Mara's Joe Morelli, and you get that, for lack of a better term, that Agent Booth from Bones kind of feel about him, right? But then there's other times when I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, it's John C. McGinley who played Dr. Cox in Scrubs. That was the vibe that I was getting off him for a lot of the movie, and I think that's part of why I wasn't quite sure whether this was supposed to be a comedy or an action comedy kind of thing. Like the movie itself, pace wise, direction wise, felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be, which is why I had these two different visions of what Morelli should have been, and they were kind of very, very conflicting, points of mental reference as I'm watching it. But now, we talked about, is Katherine Heigl Stephanie Plum, is Jason O'Mara Joe Morelli?
Fascinating. There are so many things that I want to say about that, in that when I first saw him, I was like, no, he's wrong. He's too old. He's not what I pictured at all. I think maybe I had pictured like a Ben Affleck, like younger, more chiseled, more handsome.
So not Ben Affleck.
But definitely no. He was not my picture of Joe Morelli at all.
So you wanted Gigli era Ben Affleck with the Batfleck body.
Yeah, I did. I think that Jason O'Mara played it really well. He won me over. He won me over as Joe Morelli, and I can now accept, and I could probably continue to read on the series and picture him. As far as the dynamic between the two characters, Stephanie and Joe, okay, complete spoiler alert here, they're a couple. They are, in the book series, they are very much in love. They touched on it a bit, that they had a history in high school, and
which is why she's kind of really eager to get this bounty, because
it didn't go so well, and so they have that kind of love-hate. They hate to love each other, and they love to hate each other.
And that did play somewhat well, and I'm glad they didn't go full on, but they kind of fall in love afterwards. Yeah, because I know that there were plans to make Two for the Dough as a movie, and once the box office kind of came in, and that 2% tomato meter, it's like, yeah, we're not going to do this.
Yeah, and that early in the book series too, they pretty much disliked each other. There's other spoilers I've got little Easter eggs that I can share, but I'm going to hold on to that information for right now. But I think that they played it really, really well, and as you said, I love that they didn't just have the very convenient wrap up at the end where they fall in love. No. They fought right to the very end of this movie, and that's their dynamic, and I love it.
I just find it funny, the fact that your mental image of Morelli is Ben Affleck, who played Batman, and instead they went out and got someone who was a better Batman in the role.
Irony? I think so.
See, now we just need Joe Morelli to come on screen and go, because I'm Batman.
But I definitely found visually, especially for the first movie, he was a bit old. I think he was aged. he was, yeah. And it's interesting. Almost even with Katherine Heigl, I found that she was an older version of what I had pictured. I always felt Stephanie Plum should be in her 20s. Right. But I guess timeline wise, she had just gone through a divorce when the first movie, happened in her timeline. So I guess it kind of works. It's just like as a reader of the series, you kind of, I don't know, get a more youthful feel. Not that Katherine Heigl didn't pull it off. She did. So did Jason O'Mara. It's just that.
And I think the thing between the two of them, and this is kind of why I had that, that Agent Booth kind of feel, is that the Bones series worked and worked for years because of, first the romantic tension between Temperance Brennan and Agent Booth, and then the eventual romance and the comedy kind of between the rest of the cast as well. Bones is a phenomenal series, and Bones works well. Again, another series based on a really well-loved mystery book series. You see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, especially with the various bad guys, quote unquote bad guys that she's trying to bring in, right? The bounties that within the book series as a whole, not just this first movie or the first book, One for the Money. There is so much that can be done with just, she meets the most off of the wall characters. And I think they played it really, really, really well with the old guy in her apartment building that she had to bring in. And that was probably her fastest, easiest,
bounty
bond
ever,
that she could have have done. But again, it was really well done.
Again, this is why I think, if any network execs are listening right now, two things here. First, pick up It's Not That Bad and turn it into a TV show. We're available. And B, pick up, the Stephanie Plum series and turn it into a show. Trust me when I say you'll really thank me for the Stephanie Plum series, and we'll really thank you for picking us up as a TV show. But anyways, Daniel Sunjata, who played Ranger. Now, when we were watching this, and you had kind of told me that your envisionment of Ranger was Dwayne Johnson.
The Rock.
The Rock.
Yes. And, I was pleasantly surprised. I was very pleasantly surprised.
Because that's a lofty goal to sit there and say, all right, I want The Rock and I got Daniel Sunjata. But if you're saying that he pleasantly surprised you, well, then maybe The Rock needs to up his game to Daniel Sunjata levels here.
I just think he was visually perfect. He played it well. The character of Ranger in the book series is so pivotal to Stephanie's success. So was Morelli, arguably. However, Ranger, I love that they really focused on him. In the books, he's kind of like, he comes and goes, but he's a very not often mentioned character.
He comes across to me like Harvey Keitel's The Wolf at a Pulp Fiction, where if you got a problem, he'll solve it. Now check out the beat while the DJ revolves it. But I'm sorry, I just went there. I went there, and I'm sorry. And as I'm saying it, I'm even sorry I said it myself.
I approve. I'm a fan.
I apologize to all the listeners right now. I just can't believe I vanilla iced Daniel Sunjata's Ranger while talking about Harvey Keitel in Pulp Fiction. I'm gonna go sit in the corner after this and think about what I've done.
That's a real mashup of worlds there.
But yeah, here we are. But it is very much that fix-it character, that guy that you call in to solve the issue, not necessarily to MacGyver it, But I also think, as far as a casting aside goes, if you were to put someone like The Rock into this role, it becomes a Rock movie. And that's maybe not a good thing, because it's Stephanie Plum's show. It should be Stephanie Plum's show. And I think it's actually smart casting to put someone in like a Daniel Sojato, who's not necessarily going to outshine Katherine Heigl, but who's going to bring a really good performance in order to be able to elevate everyone else.
Agreed. Completely agreed.
One of the very, not necessarily a minor character, I'm sure, as far as the book series goes, but at least minor enough in the grand scheme of the movie itself. And it's, not to say that, the actor's minor, but Patrick Fischler, who played Vinnie Plum, it's a smaller role as far as the movie goes, but this was another one of those things where it's like, this is pitch perfect casting, for what, again, I'm watching this as someone who's never read a Jan Ivanovich book. We got most of them. If Jan Ivanovich wants to send us the rest of the book, we're good with that. We'll send you a list. But, I've never read any of her books, but this guy not only feels like he would be related to Vinny, or to Stephanie Plum, but there's more to Vinny, I think, and it will lead into my next point, in that Anne Reeder, who played Connie, the secretary, again, loved her, thought she was great, but there was something about her in that it felt like she ran the place.
100%.
Right? She's the one, doling out the bounties and really making sure that, the operational side of the skip tracing works, and Vinny basically defers to her. And it makes sense then that Vinny would, basically send his, completely out of her league Stephanie Plum out to do skip tracing, and Connie's trying to keep everything afloat. And so the two of them, Patrick Fischler and Anne Reeder, I think chef's kiss casting of those two roles.
Oh my God. Absolutely. As soon as I saw Anne Reeder on the screen, the first line of dialogue out of her mouth, I was like, that's perfect. She's perfect. There's no other.
That's your Connie.
Yes. She was absolutely brilliant as Connie. And you're absolutely right that in the book series, the dynamic between Connie and Vinny, 100%. She runs the show, and yeah, it was absolutely perfect. Both of those actors just absolutely nailed it. Mm-hmm. They nailed their parts.
I don't know what I think about John Leguizamo in this as Jimmy Alpha, because, and again, I mentioned it earlier with The Rock, right? If you put Dwayne Johnson in as Ranger, it becomes a Dwayne Johnson film. But John Leguizamo, right? It's almost like you have this character, and then you have this vision of who that character should be, and it's usually someone like John Leguizamo, and then you just basically call him up. Did it feel typecast for what John Leguizamo normally pulls in?
My God, no. Actually,
really?
Yeah. For myself, the minute that you had mentioned that he's in this movie, I thought, oh, okay. He's really going to play on the comedy. Mm-hmm. But his delivery of the character itself, no, I found he was really, you didn't see it coming. You just had no idea that he was, definitely the one.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, right.
I think the thing with John Leguizamo,
he was running the show.
I think the thing with John Leguizamo is that, for all, the roles you could point to John Leguizamo as well, that's just John Leguizamo basically playing the same character and over again. I kind of wished that he brought maybe a bit more a bit more of the dark, not necessarily the darker side of that character, but a bit more, anger, or at least this threatening level to this role. And we know he can do it because of Summer of Sam. Summer of Sam, it was this really, really good movie with, it was him and it was Mira Sorvino. And, there's a lot of depth to his character in Summer of Sam. I just think Jimmy Alpha kind of came across as and again, this is just me, a two-dimensional character. Now that we were saying like it came as a surprise to you, would you, in hindsight, recast Jimmy Alpha?
I don't think so. I love how he played it. I think that in his his monologue before his untimely demise was pretty much on point. I think that he really was supposed to be a good guy, and the cool thing about the quote unquote finger quotes bad guys in this movie is that they really are just guys running a fight club or
Sopranos cast-offs.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think they're really hardened criminals, which is kind of the beauty of this story series is that she's working for a bail bondsman, so she's bringing in bounties on, really, these guys are just everyday guys who skipped a court appearance, could have forgotten, maybe they were drunk that day, we don't know, but the point is that they missed their court appearance and now they have a bond, a bounty, they have a bounty on their head. So she has to bring them in. And
I think one of the things too is that, again, we mentioned that it's set in Jersey, and we talked about Jersey Shore, regrettably talked about Jersey Shore, but it also means we have to bring up The Sopranos, because in The Sopranos, of course, you have a very mafia base, like these are bad people doing bad things, and you take a look at, and this is going off of what you have said about the Stephanie Plum series, is that these aren't necessarily bad people doing bad things. These are just idiots who didn't show up at court, right? Not necessarily bad people, And so, John Leguizamo can do comedy. We know this. He can also do dark. We know this. And
he was in the middle.
Yeah.
He was really in the middle, and I think he was kind of struggling with that. And again, he was kind of the underdog. I didn't see it coming, even though I should have known the character. But I think he played it well. I really do. And I love that he wasn't over the top. This movie itself could quite easily have gone off the rails in the comedy, and they didn't. And I like that. I like that it had that. It was dramatic and it was sexy at times. The on and off again cat and mouse chase with Stephanie and Joe. It was exactly what it needed to be, and it wasn't over the top. And I like that.
Now, as we sat down to watch this film, one of the first things you said is, I hope they have Grandma in this.
Oh, Grandma Mazur.
And, of course, Debbie Reynolds. Who's an absolute gem of an actress.
She wasn't who I pictured, though. Reading the books, in my mind, all I could picture is Estelle Getty. And I do, rest in peace, Estelle. I love her. I love...
Picture it, Joycey, 2012.
She really... I think, I think she did really well. I think it was a very diluted version of Grandma Mazur, because in the books, I think they diluted the character, and I'm not quite sure why.
I think it's one of those things where you have, by the time this movie comes out, you have 18 books in the series. 19, of course, being released in 2012, but the movie came out very early 2012. So 18 books for sure on the shelf. So you have, the Stephanie Plumiverse, very well established. And, as with any series, you get invested into the side characters and the supporting characters and the world of different people in the lives of the main characters. And when they come onto the screen, you know them, you want more of them, but in an hour and a half, you're not going to get that because, you have to focus on the main character as much as you may or may not love, the side characters in the series. So it's hard, you jump in with both feet into a series like this, and you have to give enough backstory so you kind of get the feel for who Stephanie Plum is, but you can't spend too much time on it. Otherwise, you're going to have a 3-hour Zack Snyder film, and it's just not going to do as well, even considering how well it did already at the box office.
Again, the books are quick reads, and being such a fan of the series, I can say that, Debbie Reynolds did an amazing job. Okay, no disrespect, but I think in the role of Grandma Mazur, and I was really looking, as soon as the movie started, first credits rolled,
your butt hit the chair. I'm like, where's Grandma?
I'm like, I hope Grandma's in this. So I think that either a Joan Rivers or a Betty White could have really played I expected.
But to the same token as well, and I think what Debbie Reynolds, really brought to her roles is that she never, ever, ever overstaged where the focus was going. She always had this great ability to, kind of see the whole. She saw the forest and not just the trees, So with a Betty White, you almost get a Dwayne Johnson feel in that it would upstage the scene. But now that I've said that, now I want a Dwayne Johnson and Betty White film.
Yes, 100%.
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot 2, starring Dwayne Johnson and Betty White.
Oh God, that would be amazing.
Right?
It needs to happen.
Absolutely. Or even just remake the old one. Because the old one had Stallone and Estelle Getty. Now I want Dwayne Johnson and Betty White in either a remake or a sequel of Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. I am going to blast this out so we can manifest this into reality. I am literally going to tag Dwayne Johnson on this podcast.
Twitterverse, make it happen. Make it so.
Let's put this out there, okay? Dear Dwayne, hi. This is the It's Not That Bad podcast. You are a talented actor. You've been able to do many things, but what you haven't been able to do is to bring back to life a movie that may be slightly overlooked, but still golden in nature. You see, you have the ability to create Stop or My Mom Will Shoot 2 with Estelle Getty's Golden Girls co-star, Betty White. This needs to happen. We need Dwayne Johnson and Betty White on screen together. Put it together, make it happen, put it on Netflix. I'm cool with Netflix. That'd be great. Trust me, the world will thank you, and then you can thank me afterwards. So that is my, that is my request of Dwayne Johnson. If I can manifest anything into this world, it's Dwayne Johnson and Betty White in a movie together. Totally fine with it being Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Also, I want to see him as Ranger in the Netflix series.
Nah, you can't take that from Daniel. He did such a good job.
He did a great job.
He did. But one of the things that, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, that, it felt like it would have been better as a series. But I have to ask, right? Because again, I jumped into this film knowing jack and squat about the series, except for the fact that there's a girl named Stephanie Plum and there's a whole lot of books about her. The movie at times to me felt like it took for granted that you were already invested into the series, right? There was no, there's no gentle prodding into this. You're pretty much like, crane lifted and dropped right into the deep end of the pool. Mm-hmm. So for me, it took a little bit of getting used to and kind of figuring out on the fly who is who. You went into this fan of the series. Did you need more backstory of where we were in Stephanie Plum's world, or were you fine with how you jumped in?
That's a great point, because I recognize and I realize that the way the movie was produced, again, I started out by saying the book is always better, because there's a lot of backstory and a lot of character building that needed to be done. I think the movie tried and did what it could in the hour and 34 minutes that it had, but I wanted to see more. And I think, to your point, I think, it does a disservice to anyone who hasn't read the book series to just watch the movie on its own as a standalone, because there is a lot missing. And even with the character, how Katherine Heigl played Stephanie Plum at the beginning, it took her about a half an hour into the movie to warm up into the character.
Mm-hmm. And it seemed like there was a lot going on, and the film felt a little rushed. But again, you're trying to put, I guess, an entire book into 1 hour and a half movie, of which you've already said that, there's a lot in there. Again, further lending itself better to a series, or at least expanding. Maybe that's the series. You expand from the books rather than try to cram the books into a series. Just expand more of the Stephanie Plum storyline. But it did feel a tad rushed. So, did they cover the book well enough in the movie for you?
Yeah, I really feel that they did. I feel that, and full disclosure, I watched it a second time after our first watch. And I found the more that I watched it and the more that I, slept on it and stepped away and kind of really digested what they did with the available time that they had.
Right.
Again, I really feel that it could have quite easily been a 2-hour movie, but they did a good job to just give enough and then wrap it up nicely. And I think they did really well.
I do have to ask, because obviously with any book, if you take a look at how long it would take you to actually read a book, cover to cover,
286 pages.
286 pages. If you sat down and did nothing all day, you could probably finish it. It may take you a day and a half, right? Day and a half is too long for a movie. So, of course, parts of the book are going to get left out. Was there anything out of the book that was missed and definitely should not have been?
Again, I would have read One for the Money possibly 18 years ago, if not. Yeah.
But it's still a faithful adaptation.
It was absolutely perfect. It served the character well, with what they presented. I think they did a great job to at least introduce the dynamic of the characters, and they did amazing introducing the key players.
I did like the score of the film. I felt like it kind of added to that, again, episodic type, crime of the week, or, again, like you could hear hints of what bones could be. And Deborah Lurie was the composer for that, and she's done a lot. She's done a lot of good work. She did Drop Dead Sexy. She did The Unimaginable and composed music for the remake of Footloose, which that's going to be a daunting task. And most recently, I think, or one of the more recent things was the TV series The Astronaut's Wives Club. It didn't overswell. It didn't take away. It accented nicely, and it gave it that, that comedic action type feel. I think that went across well. But we've gotten to the point now of the show. So I have to ask you, Carrie, who is your MVP of One for the Money?
This is going to come out of left field, but I got to go with Sherry Shepherd as Lula.
Love her.
Oh my God. Again, I had mentioned earlier about Connie, so I don't need to circle back to that too much. But Sherry, you absolutely personified Lula's character beautifully, and you played it well. And funny side note that I've actually listened to an audiobook of, and I can't even remember which one, I think it was maybe 23 in the book series, and the portrayal or the audiobook acting of Lula's character was awful. It was no disrespect. I'm not going to name any names. I don't know who the voice actor was.
Not going to name names because I don't know them.
Because I'm sorry, you're fired. Sherry Shepherd should have been portraying Lula always and forever. You did an amazing job. It was perfect. Yeah, that's my MVP.
That's the one thing I'll give Sherry Shepherd. And again, loved her in 30 Rock. Thought she was brilliant in 30 Rock, and she's brilliant here as well. Here you have a character, and then again, this is coming from the guy who never read the book, right? So I don't know Lula's story. I don't know if she was clearly she was portrayed fairly well, but here you have a character, and let's call it like it is. She's out on the streets, right? She's working the streets, and you could have had this very jaded, very what's in it for me kind of thing, but no, Lula's character has a lot of heart. She's doing her best, and I think the thing that Sherry brought to that role is that I think her Lula saw in Katherine Heigl's Stephanie two people that are doing their best given the crap cards that they're dealt with, and they're going to help each other rather than make things more difficult for either of them to kind of get by in life. And that's the thing. That's the heart that was kind of brought, by Sherry Shepherd to this role. I don't hate that MVP pick at all. And
the way they wrapped it up nicely at the end of the movie, having her now working for the bail bonds for Vinny. She works for Vinny now at the end of the movie, and that is true to the story. Taking it further, believe it or not, but Lula and Stephanie partner up, and Lula, and just their misadventures, like
this needs to happen tenfold.
Now. Yeah.
Dear Dwayne Johnson, you have a lot of money, like a lot of money. And if you're looking for properties to help flourish, we now need, once you're done, please do the Dwayne Johnson, Betty White film first. But once you're done with that, and you're looking for further projects to develop, call up Katherine Heigl, call up Sherry Shepherd, put them together, let them run wild. This series needs to happen. This is your deep voice of future endeavors. You're welcome, Dwayne. Trust me when I say people will thank you for making this, then you'll thank us, and we'll be all good. I'm going to pull a Gomez from Playlist Wars here. Also, shout out to Brian and Gomez from Playlist Wars. If you hadn't had a chance to listen to their show, by all means, listen to their show. I'm I'm going to change my MVP pick.
Whoa.
I'm going to.
You didn't even tell us what your first pick was.
Well, I'm going to say I had Daniel Sunjata as my original MVP pick, but
he's not The Rock.
But he's not The Rock. But as we were talking about the rest of the cast, it really kind of stuck out to me that we need to go back to the bail bond shop, and Ann Reeder is my MVP, Connie, because of just the. There's something to be said about how well a side or a secondary character helps develop and helps set the tone for the main characters. And I don't think Katherine Heigl's Stephanie Plum gets the confidence she needs if she doesn't know already that her cousin, Vinny, also my cousin Vinny, but her cousin Vinny, defers enough to Connie that she can rely on Connie to be able to keep her working and keep her on the right side of what she's got to do. There's a strength in her Connie. There's an assuredness in her Connie. And you know what? I would just basically, again, if you got a series going and she's the touch point for the adventures that's going to happen, if admittedly, yes, full disclosure here, both Carrie and I would sit down and watch Dog the Bounty Hunter, right? And Beth is kind of that Connie in that she was very much running the business in the show, and then Dog would just kind of run and go catch bounties kind of thing. But Connie really has, a very commanding presence about her in that role that, it could have just been a throwaway role, but it wasn't.
No.
And
she was pivotal.
Yeah. And that's really thanks to Ann Reeder. So to me, I'm calling the audible, and Ann Reeder is my MVP of One for the Money. So now that we've kind of gone through all of this, okay, I'm going to let you re-tomato this film here. Okay, it's not 100%. We know it's not 100%, but I don't think it's 2%. So if you had to re-tomato this, what do you give it?
I agree with the audience. I would put it at, was it 43 or 48?
It was.
It's in the 40s.
Yeah, it's in the 40s. It was 42%.
42?
42.
I'd give it even higher.
Really?
I would go 48. Again, I think they did an amazing job with the story franchise. Mm-hmm. Just a side note, and as much as I absolutely love the book, love the film, I love everything about Stephanie Plum and her misadventures. I love her dynamic with Joe Morelli and Ranger. Yes, I said it. Their little setup there that they've got.
Right.
Connie being absolutely brilliant and so not controlling, so in control of the situation and commanding the scene. Like, she is one hell of a tough cookie, and I love her. And I think that, it was played beautifully. Lula being, again, the heart of gold, having, that street smarts, and in the book, she's also a very tough lady, and that was portrayed very well, I think, in the scene where she was a victim of, she basically was put as a victim to get Stephanie's attention, right? So she was kind of really pivotal in that scene. I do have to question, though, and the movie, just kind of ran with it, the dynamic between the bounty hunters and the police department. I am not sure how these things work, but I am pretty positive that in reality, in the really real world, bounty hunters don't have that that connection and that support and that collaboration with the police department. I don't think that was based in reality, but you know what? For the storyline, it worked. And as I said, in future books and through the storyline, Stephanie's connection to the police department was always through Joe Morelli.
Mm-hmm.
In the first book, again, they had that cat and mouse love-hate dynamic, and I'm left questioning how Stephanie had that in with the police department, especially without Joe.
It did seem kind of random, but to the same token as well,
It wasn't fleshed out well.
No, but to the same token as well, maybe it's just the way it was shot, and I know it wasn't shot in Jersey. They shot a lot of it in Pittsburgh. In that it could very well be the fact that it felt like it was set in almost a smaller suburb of Jersey. So if that's Trenton. So I mean, if that I don't know Trenton that well, but I don't know if it's a bigger city or whatnot. But I wonder if it's one of those communities that when you're there, kind of everybody knows everybody kind of thing, and that would kind of make sense. But again, you're right, that wasn't fleshed out. And now that I'm thinking about the police in that movie, Trenton must have the worst cops there because they just seem really kind of bumbling and not necessarily keystone, but definitely clueless. I do have to give a shout out here to our good friend Anthony Monkey Noodles on Twitter, who said, "I saw that movie a long while back and thought it was pretty good. Got me interested to read the novel series. Naturally, the book is better, but I did find the movie fun and entertaining." Is the book better?
Yes.
Is the book always better?
All 28 of them. I mean, like I said, start with one, read each and every one, and really, they're quick reads.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned, 286 pages of the first book. Definitely it's worth the time invested. And there is just so much more. There's so much depth and so much to love about Stephanie Plum and how she bumbles her way through these bonds, these bail bonds, and she always finds herself in trouble, and either it's Ranger or Joe that is always there to pull her out of trouble and clean up her messes, and I just have to give a nod at it was almost random how they had the scene of the other competing bail bondsman who was on the hunt for Joe Morelli. Mm-hmm. And he, I'm going to totally, spoil the scene, but he steals Stephanie's keys of a car that she had stolen previously. And the minute that he gets into the Jeep or whatever it was, whatever vehicle, it explodes.
Yeah.
So again, these things just keep happening to Stephanie, and she skirts by death and, disaster so many times in any given story. Any one of the books has these wonderful little twists and turns. And in the movie, I found that it needed to be fleshed out more. It needed more time, more of a setup. More information was needed, because it was almost kind of like, well, who is this and why is this happening now? But it is pivotal to the story. So do yourself a favor, everybody, pick up the book and read the whole series, one after another. And the nice thing is that you can literally pick up, if you wanted to pick up 18, right? Each one is cleverly named, by the way. But if you pick up any one of the books, they can be standalone. You don't have to read one and then the other, because each one of them is a story of itself.
So I do wonder, because we did talk about the fact that it was an hour and a half film. Mm-hmm. Given 3 hours, could you tell the story of one book in 3 hours?
I think they did it fairly succinctly in the hour and a half. I think 3 would be too long.
I ask this
it's not Star Wars here.
No, I know it's not Star Wars, but I'm not saying it's a 3-hour long movie. But we know that American and North American based series are, they usually tend to run about 20 episodes or so. Across the pond, over the UK, you can get away with a series that lasts 3-4 episodes. So I'm just wondering, because again, to me, the uninitiated, the non-book reading, movie going public, the movie felt rushed and there was a lot going on. But I wonder if it's one of those situations where in a limited series, right? Season 1, 3 episodes, maybe 4 if you need it, you got 1 for the money. Season 2, 3 episodes, you got 2 for the dough. Season 3, and so on and so forth. Is that maybe the best treatment for this? Or would you just rather see the further adventures of Stephanie Plum, maybe not taken from the book, but continuing on a la Karen Sisko?
I think movie plot line, 1 for the money, did a great job in the hour and a half. I think for a TV series, and half an hour would not be near enough to even, touch the surface. I mean, they could do Stephanie Plum, versus this one Bond, right? And do that and accomplish that in a half an hour. But I think as an hour series, and it doesn't always have to be true to the book. I think that there's a lot of liberties that they could take, and especially if Janet Ivanovich were on board with... Janet Ivanovich would have to be involved in the script writing, in the screenplay. I think that her style of writing is so very funny, and it's so very again, the misadventures and the twists and turns that the plot takes in the books, it would be, it would be a challenge, and it would be really hard for a writing team to do it perfectly.
So better to go to the source.
Absolutely.
Than let. And there were 3 different, screenplay writers on this. So
I wonder how involved Janet Ivanovich was.
That's a very good question. The fact that, because that's got to be tough, right? And I know that's why Clive Cussler was really kind of poo-pooing on movies like Sahara and Raise the Titanic when they were released, based on his books, and they weren't to his vision of them. Janet was very, very happy with how 1 for the Money came out. She was very happy with Katherine Heigl as Stephanie Plum. So clearly the groundwork is set, and I think it's definitely something that could be flushed out. For those of you who've been listening to this now and they're like, you know what, I'm going to give this movie a shot. Please do. It's not that bad. But it's on Amazon Prime, so you can watch it there. Carrie, thank you so much for this. Thank you. I'm so happy we got a chance to watch this and talk about, arguably one of your favorite book series of all times.
And oh my gosh, thank you, Jay, for telling me that it exists. I had absolutely no idea. And now that I've seen it, first of all, I hang my head in shame for not being more aware that this was a thing.
How dare you?
But I am so, my life is enriched now that I have watched this movie. And yeah, you know what? It is so true to the storyline. It's true to the character. And yeah, the critics are wrong. Pick up a book.
The critics are always wrong. Let's just be honest.
2%. Come on, man.
Yeah,
Those 2 critics that...
Yeah, no, 2% is what you put in your coffee, okay?
Right.
That's not what you give to a movie like this. Carrie, thank you so much for this. And to the listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of It's Not That Bad. Now, here's the deal. If you think there is a movie that is unfairly maligned or just crappy enough that there's no way that we could watch it and find anything good about it, Well, we challenge you. We challenge you, fair listeners. So find us on Twitter at NotThatBadcast. Let us know. Put a movie out there. Manifest that movie into reality, and we will watch it. Dwayne Johnson, manifest your own movie, but hit us up. Toss a movie out. We'll watch it. We'll dissect it. And you know what? We're not going to regret our life choices. We're going to love every single minute of it because there are A grades and B movies. This has been It's Not That Bad. I'm your host, Jason Carey. Thank you so much. Until next time, take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, Skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.